What it do? Stay blessed and say less. It's your boy King Finesse. We are here with another video. Today we're here to watch some war things. Boy, it's by Infographics show. The title is called China versus United States. Who will win World War III? This should be an interesting topic because China does not like us, bro. They do not like us at all. And I think it's because it's like China is keep everyone within their own walls and stuff, mind their own business, don't let any information get out or get in. It's like it's kind of like North Korea. You're not allowed to get in or you're allowed to get out, if I'm saying that correctly. But with the U.S., it's too free, as people say. But I mean, let's see who would actually win.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine, most of the world's attention is on Eastern Europe and a potential confrontation between Russia and America. However, for those in the know, the real cause for concern is China's reaction to Russia's invasion. Rather than joining the world in condemning Russia, China has joined India in sidelining the seriousness of the invasion. Even worse, China now supports and helps spread Kremlin propaganda, suppressing the atrocities committed by Russia on Ukrainian civilians. Why is China so interested in helping Russia weather the global storm?
Bro, because it's a dictatorship country.
Plans to launch its own invasion, and that puts it on a collision course with the United States of America. Not long ago, China's President Xi Jinping stated that China must reunite the breakaway island of Taiwan with the mainland. After World War II, Chinese nationalists continued their war against rebel communist forces, inevitably losing and being forced to flee the mainland for the island of Taiwan. In the years since, Taiwan has flourished into a vibrant democracy and a major global economy, but China refuses to acknowledge its independence and threatens military action and economic punishment against anyone who does. The problem with what would be an otherwise internal security matter for the Chinese is that the U.S. has vowed to defend the fellow democracy against Chinese aggression. But why does China want Taiwan so bad? The reasons are numerous, but chief amongst them is because Taiwan represents a critical strategic vulnerability to China. Currently, China is hemmed in by what's known as the First Island Chain. This includes Taiwan, the northern Philippines, Borneo, Japan, and the Ryukyu Islands. Originally, the United States used the First Island Chain as a...
Yo, stop, bro. Look how big your country is, dude. Why y'all tripping? Cause it's the same thing with Russia and Ukraine, bro. Like, look how small these countries are, bro. I mean, I get it based on vulnerability, but y'all being petty. I don't like the way things are going with countries and fighting and stuff. Y'all are just being petty. Y'all being petty. It's what y'all want. Y'all want lands to conquer military might and dumb crap like that, bro. Like, come on, bro.
Strategy to hem in the Soviet Union and its allies during the Cold War, and deny them access to the Pacific in case of a war. To that end, it established strong relationships with all First Island Chain nations and partnerships that continue to this day. Now the Cold War is over, but a new Cold War has dawned, and China is America's new rival. With pro-US forces all along the First Island Chain, China will never be able to be a true global power, as its navy is too vulnerable to attack. Taking Taiwan will break the island chain in two, and give China an island fortress from which to project power deep into the Pacific. But Taiwan is itself a critical threat to China's continued existence.
I mean, I think if they do that, if they do that, I want to say they need to not inhabit Taiwan. Like, if they're going to use that as literally the mainframe of splitting everything, that, like, don't let anyone live in Taiwan. If that's just going to be a war ground, it's going to be like ground zero. But then again, I mean, I don't know. It really just depends on, like, if that's really considered somewhere to live or if that's just a military base. Because if you talking about all those island chains, it really just depends. Like, at the same time, China don't need no extra power. Like, what do we need to start war for? Like, I've never understood why people do the things they do when it comes to war. Like, it always takes that one person who wants power and want to be petty, control the whole world.
Existence under the dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party. As a democratic state, Taiwan is an example to all of China of a different, better way of life, and many young Chinese people who are being increasingly exposed to foreign culture are growing tired of the oppressive rule of the CCP. For them, Taiwan is a beacon of hope for what China could look like, rather than the nation of strict censorship, government intimidation, and very limited freedom that exists today. Despite erecting the Great Firewall in order to try and limit China's access to uncensored information, the influence from outside of China still reaches many of the country's citizens. This is a dire threat to the CCP, and thus neutralizing Taiwan and bringing it into the fold is but one step into ensuring its own survival. Next, it must topple the United States as the head of the global order so it can export its brand of authoritarianism around the globe. If it can control global culture, it doesn't need to fear rebellion within its own borders. Taking Taiwan is a strategic necessity if China is going to be able to challenge the influence of the U.S. If China is going to rise as the dominant superpower.
Yo, this is what I'm talking about. They're trying to rule the world, bro. Oh my god, yo, like, they are so petty, bro. Like, leave us alone. Like, you don't need to be, bro. Y'all already want everyone to be like y'all. Keep it within your own boundaries. Why are you trying to take Taiwan and then you're trying to get us? Like, you're literally just like Russia. Like, you're gonna turn on Russia next? Come on, bro.
Even just one that can compete with the United States. It must also be able to control the South Pacific. Currently, the United States Navy operates with impunity across the Pacific, and this puts critical Chinese trade routes in serious risk in case of war against the U.S. China imports the majority of its oil and relies on exports for much of its trade. If the U.S. were to cut this lifeline off, China's economy would shrink significantly. Taking Taiwan and throwing the U.S. out of the South Pacific thus ensures the safety and security of its trade, and removes the dagger the U.S. currently holds to China's throat in case of a war. But how exactly is China going to take on the world's most powerful military? Is it truly capable of challenging the U.S.? And what do the numbers say? China's strategy to dethrone the U.S. is to dominate what...
Now, here's another thing. I don't think China realizes how powerful we are, considering that we have their people too. We have Germans, we got Russians, we got French, we got Jamaicans, we got Africans, we got everyone of every culture in the U.S. We're gonna know your weaknesses, bro. Like, come on, dude. Like, that's just what I don't understand. Why are you trying so hard to rule the world? Make it make sense. Mind your business. Stay in your lane.
Come to be called the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The first industrial revolution was the use of steam power to mechanize production, allowing for never-before-seen productivity and efficiency. Not long after came the second industrial revolution, heralded by cheap and abundant electricity, which allowed mass production on an epic scale. The third industrial revolution introduced advanced electronics and information technology to automate production, and now we're building on this revolution for what will become known as the fourth industrial revolution. This new revolution will be a digital revolution, with billions of people connected electronically and breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, quantum...
That's going to be our extinction. I'm just let you know that now. That's going to be our extinction.
Install a steam engine, couldn't picture what the world would look like just 10
Robots
years
are going to rule the world
It's hard for us
next
to predict what life will look
100
like
years.
in the wake of the fourth industrial revolution, though it is going to be the most revolutionary change in the affairs of human history. However, China is picturing the fourth industrial revolution as the key to global hegemony, and it's investing billions into ensuring that it is the dominant power in the new world to come. China's strategy to dominate the world in the coming decades is a fusion of civilian and military application of technology. First, it's striving to be a leader in the technology department, ensuring that it is the first to create revolutionary technologies, thus enriching itself financially and creating dependency from the world on Chinese goods and services.
Actually, comment down below who you actually would think would win, because if we think about it, I played like military games like Red Alert, Command and Conquer, Call of Duty, Battlefield. They say that China just has more technology. Like, if you see a lot of the video games of combat, they're trying to make it seem like the U.S. is just straight balanced out. The Russia is just built on brute force, and then China's just based on technology. Like, at this point, they don't need to fight. They just use like whatever drones that they have. That's an interesting concept for her. I'm trying to see what is really going on, but they're taking forever to start World War III. I mean, I get that they're trying to explain like the process of it, but I want to actually see who will really win.
Secondly, China is seeking to quickly turn new technological breakthroughs into usable military technologies that will allow it to surpass and dominate the U.S. China envisions future technologies as increasing the speed of future warfare, with future military success reliant on having forces that are mechanized, informatized, and intelligentized. According to the 2021 DoD's China Military Power Report, what this means is that China understands that victory is only possible with fully mechanized forces capable of being quickly moved into a conflict zone and supported with heavy firepower. However, those forces must also have access to a wealth of information via disseminated sensor systems, with this information shepherded through artificial
Technology.
intelligence that can give battlefield commanders exactly the information they need at the moment, while temporarily ignoring what they don't. Warfighters don't just need information, they need help sorting through it quickly, utilizing what's presently useful. If this sounds familiar to any of our viewers, it's because this is exactly the requirements the U.S. military was investigating just a few years ago. China's Academy of Military Science has now established a mandate that the People's Liberation Army's warfighting theory and doctrine fully capitalize on disruptive technologies like AI and autonomous systems. Much like the U.S. did in the First Cold War, China's focus is on building a modern state-of-the-art force. But today's force must be capable of accessing vast amounts of information and supported by AI that can execute automated tasks and assist with decision-making.
Technology.
China wants to teach machines how to wage war, so they can advise commanders in the
That's what I'm saying. Look at that thing. It's technology. They need technology.
Network, but those capabilities are increasing every year. It was only a few years ago that China first established a combined arms operations capability by establishing joint chains of command between its services in the same style as the United States. Now it seeks to match the U.S.'s networked capabilities by 2027 and then exceed them shortly after. But why is networking so important? Well, for one, it's what makes the U.S. military so immediately lethal to opponents. Having the ability to network together ground, sea, air, and space assets allows for the swift exchange of information and gives a fighting force incredible adaptability and initiative on the battlefield. For an example of what happens when a modern force is not networked, all one has to do is look at the terrible losses being suffered by the Russians against a nation a fraction their size and capability. In the 21st century, the Russian military is still fighting battles like it was World War II, and the Ukrainians are making them suffer for it. In order to become a global leader in defense technology, China is taking a page straight out.
So this is why I'm laughing, yo, because he just said Ukraine is making them suffer for it. Look how small Ukraine is, bro. It's giving the movie 300. Cause when the I don't really remember the name of them, but I know the Spartans was holding them off in the cave. They all just came crashing down. They had shields up. No, it was not moving. They weren't moving. That's how Ukraine is right now, bro. Like, look how small they are compared to Russia. Man. I mean, I feel bad for the war going on, but still, Russia gotta chill, bro.
His book by pursuing a strategy of civil-military fusion. What made the United States the superior power during the First Cold War was the close partnership between its military and civilian industry, which thrived in an environment of innovation. Such a partnership allowed for a swift adaptation of civilian technological breakthroughs into military assets and vice versa. With the U.S. military technology breakthroughs quickly adapted into civilian technologies, making U.S. companies the most competitive in the world. Artificial intelligence, robotics, quantum computing, and biotechnology will shape not just the future of
that's because the U.S. government cares for their people. Like, that's literally what they have, benefits for. If you literally decide to go into the military, you don't have to be in just straight combat. They're gonna have you in positions where, you put for, like, for example, I'm a graphic design guy, and if I go into graphic design into the military, I can do different things like advertisements, banners. It doesn't just have to be just advertisement. It can literally developing three-dimensional versions of AI and what weapons can be developed and stuff like that. Just little stuff. Otherwise, and then you got China, who only just worried about military and brute force, but at the same time they don't really have people who know what they're doing and know what they're talking about. Like, we're more worried about the people. The people are trying to build things. Like, they're trying to make money. They're trying to make a living. So the military actually gives you those benefits to do what they got to do, and you help them out.
Then one or more of these areas will make China a true competitor to the United States.
I feel like I'm talking nonsense. I can hold you.
Over all these critical areas will make China an insurmountable superpower. In order to achieve the goal, China is investing heavily in domestic innovation, but also in foreign investment to acquire technology, the recruitment of global talent, academic collaboration for research and development, and finally, China's strong point, military and industrial espionage. So how is the U.S. preparing for this looming confrontation? First, as scary as China's ascension may seem, it's important to remember that it's still running uphill against America. Since the end of the First Cold War, the United States has influenced a new global order based on growing liberal democratic values. As we've seen in the global backlash against Russia, the New World Order frowns on the autocracies and abuses of the Old World. Vladimir Putin is a relic of the old world with no place in modern society, and with a unified voice, the West has shouted him and his nation down, even going so far as to severely hurt themselves financially in order to punish Russian military aggression. This should be of grave concern to China's Xi Jinping and his Chinese Communist Party, as they too are relics of the old world. The uprisings in Hong Kong that lasted for months are but a taste of the simmering tension just under the surface of Chinese society, and proof to the CCP of the corrupting influence of liberal Western values. Should China follow in Russia's footsteps and engage the world in hostility, it too will quickly find itself a pariah and outcast nation, effectively crippling any bid to become a global leader. This is why it's important for China to undermine Western values. The United States remains the world leader in technological innovation, despite mounting pressure from China and beyond. But the US is far ahead in one important area of technology: its ability to rapidly commercialize new and emerging technology on global markets. While Chinese technology grows in influence around the world,
that's the thing,
American companies are already
everybody
established brands.
is not going to like China or Russia. There's going to be everyone against them too, because they're so worried about ruling the dang world.
Commercial success is
They're
also
going to get
due to its
overrun.
culture domination. American brands are present in every country on earth, but so is its culture. With one of the most rapidly evolving cultures in the world, U.S. culture can be hard to define or nail down, but cultural export instruments such as Hollywood and Silicon Valley remain unassailable by their Chinese counterparts. For instance, while China may have developed the massively popular TikTok app, it wasn't until China pushed the app on the American marketplace and established relationships with American influencers that the app exploded in popularity. This is important because military and economic might only count for so much, and the U.S. has used culture to bridge ideological gaps with partner nations around the world.
Why they put it on their breast?
Is the bedrock of strong strategic partnerships, and China has absolutely nothing of the like except for its partnership with North Korea. Shared culture and shared values are the reason the U.S. remains the leader of the free world, and not because of its military being the strongest. Culture is another problem for China in its ongoing confrontation against the U.S. and the rest of the West, because one of China's biggest problems is creating immigrant Chinese citizens. While over 1 million Chinese Americans reside in America, only a few thousand American Chinese have made their home in China. If China seeks to dominate future technologies by recruiting promising talent from around
that's the
the
point I
world,
made earlier.
it must be able
We
to
have a lot
entice
of
them,
their
not just
people here.
financially, but also with the desire to make China their new home. This is a massive problem for China versus the US, which remains one of the most attractive destinations for the world's most talented, due to not just economic opportunity, but its liberal democratic values. Finally, China must not just triumph over the US in future competition, but against the world, because outdoing the United States in one or more areas of technological innovation means little due to wide-reaching US alliances and partnerships. For America, a win by one of its allies is still a win for the US, while China must stand against the world completely alone. But how do the numbers stand today? What if a conflict broke out tomorrow between the two military heavyweights? Currently, the US is ranked as the world's #1 military power, with China in the #3 spot. However, this is debatable, as given Russia's extremely poor performance in Ukraine, we expect that China will climb to the #2 spot by next year, dethroning Russia, whom it seems derives most of its power from its ability to threaten with nuclear weapons. However, poor Russian...
I'm sorry, it's so funny how they're clowning Russia, bro, because, dude, they are not doing anything. Like, all they're doing is threatening people with nuclear war. I don't think they're strong at all. I'm sorry. Hands up, don't shoot, bro. It's Russia, bro. What have they really done besides point missiles at you? Without that, are they really strong? Because we can literally be the strongest and not have to resort to nuclear weapons.
Should deeply concern China, because just like Russia, the Chinese military is also completely untested against modern capable foes. While Russian forces were more than adequate to crush uprisings in Aleppo and Chechnya, Russian superiority in numbers with equipment meant very little when it went up against Ukraine's Western-trained military. With China's last war being in Vietnam in the 70s, a conflict it ended up losing, China should be extremely concerned about facing the United States in battle, whom, unlike China, is thoroughly tested in modern combat. Much like Russia, China has lacked a robust training regimen for its military, with exercises typically being highly scripted and mostly for the benefit of visiting dignitaries. This culture has begun to change within China, but the nation is yet to match the robust training schedule of the US military. Realistic training, though, is not enough for the Chinese military, as it, also like Russia, must also contend with a legacy of corruption. that has plagued its ranks for decades. President Xi Jinping's massive anti-corruption effort has produced great results, but the service must still contend with many officers who hold rank due to the time-honored Chinese tradition of gifting, wherein a junior official gifts a senior official in exchange for promotion. Currently, the Chinese military numbers at 2 million strong, dwarfing the U.S. military in its 1.39 million strong force. This gives China a numbers advantage, but the U.S. retains a great deal of force multipliers that don't just even the playing field but tip it decisively in its favor. Chief amongst these is a well-trained and well-equipped modern fighting force, while Chinese units vary widely in modernity. A hefty investment in precision weaponry, integrated forces, and superior sensor and tracking technologies make the U.S. a lethal adversary even against a numerically superior foe. Reserves will play a critical role in any Sino-American conflict, but it's evenly matched.
It's given Call of Duty.
510,000 ready reservists versus the U.S.'s 442,000. American reservists receive continual training of 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks out of the year, while training for Chinese reservists is improving but still spotty. This provides the U.S. with a smaller reservist pool, but one that is more quickly capable of being introduced into the fight, while Chinese reservists require longer training periods or risk being thrown into combat completely unprepared.
Because they're idiots. They can't fight.
Defense budget dwarfs China's at $770 billion versus China's $250 billion, but that's not telling the whole story. First, the U.S. budget includes many costs for operations that would have nothing to do in case of war with China, such as funding for its 11 unified combatant commands spread out across the world. These combatant commands are responsible for general peacekeeping, and their presence is a globally stabilizing force. Without them, local conflicts would quickly sprout and spiral out of control. For example, without U.S. Central Command, Iran would quickly seek to neutralize regional adversaries such as Saudi Arabia, causing massive global disruption of oil and other trade that passes through the region. Also, China does not count all of its military investments within its published budget report, cleverly hiding them within other non-military budgets. A large part of its nuclear modernization initiative, for example, is coming from funds outside of its official military budget. Lastly, because Chinese military equipment is sourced locally, it pays less for goods than the U.S. does for its own equipment. And that's because the standard of living is lower in China, with lower wages and less benefits, which means cheaper production costs. When compared by purchasing power parity, China's budget is significantly closer to the U.S.'s than a first glance would lead one to believe. Any war between the U.S. and China would be waged at sea and air, making comparisons of the two sides' air forces and navies of utmost.
Yeah, I'm really not too surprised.
An air fleet of 13,247 aircraft, easily dwarfing the Chinese air fleet of 3,285. When it comes to fighter aircraft, the two sides are close together, with the U.S. having 1,957 fighters versus China's 1,200. American air mobility absolutely dwarfs Chinese mobility, though, with a transport fleet of 982 versus China's 286. Understandable given that the U.S. faces conflicts far from its own shores, and China has little need to move its own forces significant distances. However, the massive advantage in airlift capability makes the U.S. military much more flexible and agile than the Chinese military.
Yeah.
Perhaps the most important distinction between the two air forces, though, is the number of special mission aircraft, with the U.S. operating 774 versus China's 1.
These are crazy. The Hawkeye, I heard of the Hawkeye, the Grumman E2 Hawkeye. I don't really know. I wonder what the B-52 look like in real. I've only seen it in the games, but I wonder what the B-52 looks like. I've only seen it in the games, but so that's interesting.
14. The U.S. has placed a premium on equipping aircraft for everything from early warning to electronic and signals intelligence and anti-submarine warfare. The U.S. dwarfs China in special mission capabilities, and it's part of what makes the U.S. Air Force and Navy so lethal. Unless a confrontation between the U.S. and China takes place on Taiwan, attack helicopters won't figure into the equation. However, if they do, the U.S. outnumbers China with 910 versus China's 281.
Yo, they beat them by air, sea, and land, bro.
Used by both sides only further skew the advantage to the U.S. For air superiority, the U.S. fields the F-15 Eagle and F-18 Super Hornet. A fleet of 187 operational F-22s are unmatched by China, who is yet to field its own fifth-generation fighter in any significant numbers. Adding to China's problem is the U.S.'s Rapid Raptor program, which aims to bring a sizable contingent of F-22s to any battle space in the world within 24 hours. China's competitor versus the Raptor is the J-20, which is equipped with inferior engines versus American planes, requiring the use of canards on the body of the plane. These canards and other obvious engineering flaws have led to defense analysts to conclude the J-20 has at best only a slightly smaller radar cross-section than a traditional fourth-generation fighter. In fact, India claims it has frequently observed and tracked Chinese J-20s with long-range radar. The rest of the Chinese Air Force varies widely in modernity, with a significant part of its Air Force still flying Cold War Russian-made or Chinese-licensed relics. While China would initially put its most modern fighters, such as the J-16, J-11s, and Su-30s, into the fight first, once those have been downed, it'll be increasingly reliant on older and older planes. Meanwhile, the United States doesn't just have a completely modern air fleet, but it's adding dozens of fifth-generation F-35s every year to its arsenal.
That's what I'm saying. We build everything new. That's the problem. Like you said, they're true traditional.
Being added a year across the various services. In a war where air power would be decisive, the U.S. not only has the numbers advantage, but also the technological advantage. At sea, the U.S. Navy is outnumbered by the Chinese Navy, with 484 vessels versus China's 777. However, there are numbers, once again, only telling part of the story. The U.S. operates 11 aircraft carriers versus China's 2, and American aircraft carriers can bring over 800 aircraft into the fight versus China's grand total of 70. China's inflated naval numbers take into account things like missile boats, of which it has 84, while the U.S. only operates 10. In terms of tonnage, the U.S. Navy has over twice the hardware of the Chinese Navy, 4.6 million tons versus 2 million tons. A better way to compare the capabilities of the two fleets
These jokers gonna get clapped, yo.
metric, Battle Force missiles. This is a count of the total number of missiles that a fleet has for use in combat before requiring resupply. This includes anti-ship missiles, land attack missiles, surface-to-air missiles, and torpedoes. Excluded from the count are short-range self-defense missiles like the U.S.'s SEARAM. In 2019, the U.S. Navy had 11,834 Battle Force missiles versus China's 5,250. The gap is narrowing, but not significantly, with China adding 15 more Type 55 cruisers with 112 missile cells and 6 torpedo tubes each throughout the 2020s. That will increase total Battle Force missiles by 1,770, just over half of what the U.S. fields. Under the surface, China has the advantage with 71 submarines versus the U.S.'s 68. However,
doesn't
Chinese
do
subs
anything.
are mostly conventionally powered, while the U.S. subs are all nuclear. That makes U.S. submarines much more robust and able to operate for longer, but also decreases their vulnerability while operating. Chinese submarines are also an order of magnitude louder than U.S. subs, with their Jin-class ballistic missile submarines having an acoustic signature of around 1.
Yo, it's a wrap. U.S. won this fight.
Jin-class submarines have an acoustic signature of 95 decibels, which is just 5 decibels over background ocean noise at an average of 90 decibels. Submarine warfare has always been a weakness of China, and it looks to continue being so for the foreseeable future. While the U.S. clearly has the naval advantage, it's important to remember that China can concentrate most of its fleet into a Pacific war against America, while the U.S. has naval commitments around the world. Even if it were to recall the bulk of its fleet for action in the Pacific, such an act would take from days to weeks to mature into a sizable transit of combat power into the theater. Realistically speaking, the U.S. Navy maintains an edge over China, but the two sides are very close to parity in terms of capabilities. Where the U.S. advantage comes is in its ability to quickly replenish combat losses with well-trained crews and modern ships, while Chinese combat losses are not so easily replaced. Further honing America's advantage over China is its partnership with regional powers such as Japan and Australia, who would either allow the U.S. to use their territory as bases of operation for war against China, or very likely join the conflict itself. A new trilateral defense pact between the United Kingdom, the United States,
China
and
will get
Australia
clapped,
is even
yo.
seeing the U.S. building nuclear attack submarines for Australia on the condition that in case of war, it will join in the effort against the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and Air Force. America's advantage in equipment and technology is sizable and looks set to remain so, but it's the U.S. global partnerships and championing of liberal values that present the greatest likely insurmountable challenge for China. Until the Chinese Communist Party changes its core values, if it wishes to fight against America, it's picking a fight against most of the free world. Now go check out Could Taiwan...
Nah, that sounds about right. Honestly, we all know who was going to win regardless. If we're number one and they're technically number 3, they could be number 2, but even still, like, China will get clapped. Because if they try to pick a fight with us, they're picking a fight with the entire world. Now, if it's one-on-one, just like he said, we have air surveillance, underwater submarines with more nuclear power. The airships, the ships themselves. Oh, sure, they can have more, but ours is more technically advanced. We just have more modern stuff. We're more technologically advanced. There we go. That's the right word, bro. They're getting beat. They're so modern. Like, this is not World War I. This is World War III. We're always trying to look to advance things, but hey, man, comment down below who you think would actually win and who you think who's close enough to even trying to beat us. You feel me? But it's your boy King Finesse. We gotta hit out.